The greatest war you will ever fight won't be on a battlefield. It won't involve swords, armies, or rulers. It will happen in silence inside your own mind. Because before you can conquer the world, you must conquer yourself. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that the man who cannot rule his emotions, his impulses, and his weaknesses will forever be ruled by them. And that kind of man is not fit to hold power. Not over a city, not over an army, not even over his own life. Most people think domination starts with learning strategy, persuasion, or manipulation, but Machiavelli would laugh at that. Because what good is strategy if your emotions betray you every time someone insults you? What good is persuasion if you can't persuade yourself to stay disciplined? The real battlefield isn't between you and others. It's between you and the side of you that prefers comfort, safety, and approval. That's the enemy that wins most wars. When Machiavelli spoke of control, he wasn't just talking about political control. He meant psychological control, the ability to keep your thoughts from scattering like leaves in the wind. If you can't keep yourself calm in chaos, the world will control you with ease. Think about it. Every empire that fell started with internal decay, not external attack. The same applies to people. You don't fall because someone stronger appeared. You fall because you grew weak from within. Self-conquest starts when you realize your impulses are not you. Anger, jealousy, fear, laziness. They whisper in your ear, pretending to be your voice. But they aren't. They're the invaders. The man who learns to separate himself from them begins his rule. When someone offends you and you don't react, when temptation calls and you say no when you're exhausted but still move forward, that's conquest. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said control is the foundation of power. But here's the trap. Most people want power before discipline. They want others to respect them while they can't even respect themselves. They seek to change the world without first mastering their own moods. And so they chase validation, attention, influence, believing it's strength. Machiavelli would see that as weakness, in disguise, because power gained without internal control always collapses. It's a building with no foundation. The moment someone threatens their ego, they break. If you want to rule yourself, start by observing your patterns like a strategist. When do you lose control? Who can provoke you easily? What situations make you act out of fear or pride? Once you map your triggers, you start seeing them not as fate but as tools. Every weakness, when understood, becomes an instrument of strength. The man who knows his flaws deeply can weaponize them. For example, if you know your anger blinds you, you can learn to delay your response by hours or even days. That delay becomes your sword. Because while others are reacting instantly, you're strategizing. Machiavelli's brilliance was in understanding that true control isn't suppression. It's redirection. You don't destroy emotion, you command it. Anger can fuel focus. Fear can sharpen awareness. Desire can be converted into ambition. The ruler of himself doesn't eliminate passion, he makes it serve him. That's what separates those who rise from those who remain trapped. And if you look closely at the people who dominate their fields, you'll notice one thing. They are calm in moments where others panic. It's not that they don't feel fear. They've simply trained themselves to not let it steer them. That's the hidden art Machiavelli would have admired most. The ability to remain unshaken when everything is shaking. Now here's where it gets darker. To conquer yourself, you must first confront yourself. And that's the part most avoid, because you'll have to look at your cowardice, your envy, your laziness, your vanity, all the things you pretend aren't there. Machiavelli would say, expose your own corruption before the world does. The man who hides his flaws is defenseless. The one who studies them becomes untouchable because you can't be blackmailed by your own truth. Every time you justify your weakness, you hand away your crown. Every time you say, this is just who I am, you declare your defeat. A conqueror never says that. He says, this is who I was. There's a difference. And that shift from justification to transformation is the moment power begins. Here's a simple but brutal rule Machiavelli would give you. If you cannot command yourself, you have no right to command anyone. Because leading others requires more than intellect. It requires emotional endurance. People follow strength they can feel. And strength isn't loud. It's disciplined. It's the quiet ability to hold your ground when everyone else bends. But let's be honest, Self-mastery is a natural. The human mind wants pleasure, not power. It wants to feel good now, even if it costs everything later. So the conqueror's path is lonely. You will say no when others indulge. You'll stay calm when others scream. You'll walk away when your ego wants to fight. People will call you cold, detached, even heartless. But that's the price of rule. A ruler cannot afford to be ruled by the same emotions as the ruled. Here's something most never realize. The world mirrors your internal state. If you live in chaos, chaos will find you. If you live in control, opportunities will submit to you. People think luck decides success, but luck bows to discipline. Machiavelli saw that fortune favors the man who prepares, not the man who hopes, and preparation is impossible without self-command. Imagine a king who keeps his palace spotless but neglects the throne room. That's what it looks like when someone builds status, wealth, or followers without conquering himself. The throne looks impressive, but inside, it's chaos. One crisis, one betrayal, one insult, and the empire falls. That's why Machiavelli's advice remains eternal. Secure your inner kingdom first. Make your emotions your soldiers, your habits, your walls, and your mind your fortress. But don't confuse self-control with repression. Repression is weakness pretending to be strength. It's a man boiling inside, desperate to appear calm. Real control is effortless, not because it's easy, but because you've trained for it. The emotion still comes, but it passes through you like wind through stone. You feel it, but it cannot move you. To reach that state, you must build rituals of discipline so strong they survive even on your worst days. Wake when you don't want to. Work when no one's watching. Think before reacting. Each act of control is a declaration of rule over yourself. That's what Machiavelli meant by the invisible empire. The kingdom inside you that no one sees but everyone feels. And here's the irony. Once you master yourself, the world becomes easier to master. Because most people are predictable. They're slaves to the same impulses you've conquered. They'll chase pleasure, flee discomfort, seek validation. And once you see that pattern, you can influence it. Self-control gives you X-ray vision into human behavior. It's how you stay calm while others self-destruct. If you ever wonder why powerful people seem so composed, it's because they already fought the battle you're still fighting, the one against themselves. They learned the hardest truth. Machiavelli ever implied, ruling others is a privilege earned by ruling yourself first. Those who skip that step may rise fast, but they fall faster. Because without internal order, every victory turns to dust. You must learn to hold yourself accountable when no one else does. To speak to yourself like a general addressing his army. We do not retreat. We do not panic. We do not beg. Your mind must hear that enough times to obey it instinctively. Because one day when everything collapses around you, you'll have no one left to command but yourself, and that will decide your fate. To conquer yourself is to become your own ruler and your own servant at once. The ruler sets the vision, the servant executes it, and together they form the rarest type of power, sovereignty, not over others, but over one's own nature. And once you reach that point, the world stops feeling like an enemy to conquer. It becomes territory to organize. Because when you've mastered the inner battlefield, the outer one looks simple. Everything begins there. The real kingdom isn't out there, it's in here. And the one who masters it first masters everything else. Every man believes he wants to rule until he realizes ruling means restraint. You can't build a kingdom while being enslaved by distraction. You can't command respect while being ruled by emotion. Machiavelli's hidden lesson was that power demands silence. Not the silence of weakness, but of control. The more control you have within, the less chaos you create without. And in a world full of noise, that silence is terrifying because it cannot be manipulated. Most people today are conquered every morning, not by armies, but by the first thing they see on their phones. Their attention stolen, their emotions provoked, their focus divided. They wake up as servants, not rulers. Machiavelli would have said, "He who cannot guard his attention will never guard his power." Every notification is a siege engine at your gates. Every distraction is a disguised invader. And when you lose the war for your focus, the world doesn't need to defeat you. You've already surrendered. To conquer yourself, you must learn to observe rather than react. When you get angry, watch it like a fire you don't feed. When you feel fear, study it like a spy you've caught. The point isn't to feel nothing. It's to understand everything. Machiavelli's wisdom was brutal because it forced men to see their emotions not as truths, but as tools. He would tell you, your feelings are servants, not masters. Command them or be enslaved by them. Let's talk about power over emotion first. Imagine someone insults you in public. Most people's instinct is to respond instantly to defend their pride. But what happens? They reveal it was never real pride, only insecurity disguised as honor. The man who truly owns himself doesn't offend his ego. He watches the other expose theirs. Machiavelli would say, never react when provoked. The one who provokes you now controls you. The moment you take the bait, the throne is no longer yours. Next, power over desire. The world trains you to crave attention, approval, pleasure, recognition. But every craving you chase controls you. Machiavelli would advise restraint not for morality, but for mastery. If you can resist what others can't, you control what others want. The strongest desire isn't the one you follow. It's the one you can walk away from. When you learn to desire strategically, your life stops being random. You stop moving from urge to urge and start moving with direction. That's how rulers think. A ruler doesn't chase what feels good. He chooses what strengthens his position. And if that means boredom, isolation, or sacrifice, so be it. Because those who need constant stimulation are the easiest to conquer. All it takes is the right temptation at the right time. The disciplined mind is immune to that. You can't bribe a man who already has enough. You can't control a man who doesn't crave your validation. That's why Machiavelli's truest students aren't the charming. They're the detached. But there's another level to self-conquest deeper than emotion or desire. It's the ability to manage your perception of time. Most people live like beggars in the present moment. Desperate for immediate payoff, allergic to patience. They destroy long-term power by chasing short-term wins. Machiavelli warned rulers about this. Impatience blinds even the smartest men. When you can delay gratification while the rest of the world chases dopamine, you gain an invisible advantage. Clarity. Because patience is perspective. To conquer yourself is to control the timeline of your reactions. You decide when to speak, when to act, when to wait. You no longer live at the mercy of the moment. Think of it like this. The impulsive man plays checkers. The disciplined one plays chess. The difference isn't intelligence. It's control over time. Here's something few understand. Self-conquest doesn't make you robotic. It makes you strategic. Machiavelli never advocated killing emotion. He advocated mastering it. Imagine a general in war. He still feels fear, but he uses it to sharpen awareness. He still feels anger, but he channels it into precision. That's the art of converting emotion into advantage. Control isn't suppression, it's alchemy. You transform raw impulse into deliberate power, but there's a cost. The more you conquer yourself, the more detached you become from those who haven't. You'll stop enjoying meaningless conversations. You'll lose interest in gossip, validation, trends. You'll feel misunderstood. People will accuse you of arrogance when in truth you've simply stopped depending on approval. That's the loneliness of mastery, the moment you realize you no longer need the crowd to confirm your worth. Machiavelli would call that the birth of sovereignty. Sovereignty means you no longer beg for peace. You enforce it. You don't seek validation. You command respect through presence alone. And the reason that presence feels so powerful is because it's built on self-control. People can sense when a man is unshakable. It's in his eyes, his tone, his stillness. That's not charisma. It's composure. Charisma can be faked. Composure cannot. The most dangerous person isn't the loudest or the strongest. It's the one you can't read. Because if you can't predict him, you can't manipulate him. Machiavelli understood this deeply. When you control your expression, you control how others perceive your power. The world fears what it cannot understand. So if you wish to rule, don't just master your actions. Master your silence. Silence is more than the absence of words. It's the refusal to act when everyone else expects you to. It makes people question what you know that they don't. And once they start wondering, you're already in control. Machiavelli would call this psychological warfare, the kind where you never lift a sword but still win every battle. Let's take an example. Imagine two leaders facing crisis. One panics, makes statements, shifts blame, tries to look in control. The other says nothing, observes, waits, then makes one precise move that changes everything. Which one holds power? Always the second. The world confuses noise with strength, but strength lives in stillness. And here's the part most can't accept. Conquering yourself will require betraying parts of yourself. The comfortable parts, the naive parts, the emotional parts. You'll have to sacrifice who you were for who you need to become. That's why so few ever do it, because it feels like self-betrayal. But Machiavelli would argue it's self-purification. You're not killing your humanity. You're stripping away its weaknesses. The final form of self-mastery is not control for control's sake. It's freedom. When nothing can shake you, tempt you, or break you, you're finally free to rule, not over others, but over your own destiny. Most people want freedom without discipline. They want peace without struggle. But Machiavelli knew that freedom is a reward, not a right. It's earned by those who command their inner kingdom so completely that no external storm can overthrow it. So the question is no longer, how do I conquer the world? It's, have I conquered myself enough to deserve it? Because every failure in leadership, love, or ambition begins the same way, with a man who lost control of himself. The battle was never out there. It was always here. And until you win that one, every other victory is temporary. You won't conquer the world by force. You'll conquer it by discipline so deep that the world bends to your rhythm. The man who owns himself becomes unpredictable to everyone else. He decides when to act, when to withdraw, when to strike, and when to stay still. That's why self-mastery is terrifying to others. It means they can no longer control you through temptation or fear. They realize their usual tactics. Guilt, flattery, intimidation no longer work. You become a mirror that reflects their chaos back at them, calm and unbothered. Machiavelli understood that control isn't just power, it's protection. When you've conquered yourself, people's manipulation feels almost transparent. You see through it before they even realize they're trying. That's because you've seen every trick your own mind uses to deceive you. The same patterns that play within you play within others. Once you've studied your own weaknesses, theirs become obvious. This is why Machiavelli would say, "He who governs himself knows how all men may be governed." Self-conquest turns awareness into armor. You no longer fear betrayal because you've already confronted your capacity to betray yourself. You no longer fear humiliation because you've already faced your own insecurities. Nothing external can wound you deeper than the wounds you've already healed internally. And that's when you become truly dangerous. Not because you seek conflict, but because you no longer need to avoid it. Most people spend their lives reacting to the world. They fight for respect, for recognition, for fairness. But the conqueror doesn't chase these things. He creates conditions where they naturally appear. When you rule yourself, you set your own standards of conduct. You don't stoop to the level of disrespect to demand respect. You make your composure the proof of it. And people sensing something unshakable begin to treat you differently without understanding why. But here's the paradox Machiavelli would whisper to you. Total control requires moments of surrender. The ruler who grips everything too tightly breaks it. You must know when to step back, when to let time do your work. To conquer yourself doesn't mean crushing every emotion into silence. It means knowing which to obey and which to ignore. Sometimes the best command is patience. Sometimes power means doing nothing. When you control your impulses, you begin to sense the rhythm of timing, the invisible law of advantage. You stop forcing outcomes. You start waiting for them. The world rewards the man who moves when others hesitate and waits when others rush. Machiavelli knew timing was everything. A ruler who acts too soon fails. One who acts too late loses. But the ruler who commands himself knows exactly when to strike. And this control over timing gives rise to something even greater. Presence. Presence isn't charisma or charm. It's the weight of self-command that enters the room before you do. It's the silence that makes others pause. Presence can't be faked because it's built from thousands of invisible victories. Moments you said no to distraction, no to impulse, no to weakness. Every act of discipline becomes a layer of authority. That's why the calm man is often the most feared. He radiates power because he's fought every war within himself and won. Machiavelli would tell you the world bows not to the loud but to the unshaken. You cannot be unshaken if you haven't been tested. So if life feels like it's breaking you, understand it's training you. Every challenge that exposes your impatience, every insult that touches your ego, every delay that frustrates you, they're all battles in the same war. The war for your own command. Win them and nothing outside can conquer you again. You start realizing that the people who seem most powerful are often the most enslaved. They're addicted to admiration, terrified of obscurity, and constantly performing. You, on the other hand, no longer need to perform. You can disappear for months, work in silence, and return with results that speak louder than words. That's sovereignty. That's what it means to have conquered yourself, to need nothing but purpose itself. And here's where the final transformation happens. Once you've mastered yourself, you stop wanting to conquer the world in the old sense. You no longer crave domination or recognition. You crave precision. You begin playing a subtler game. The game of influence, not control. The self-mastered man doesn't impose order. His presence inspires it. He doesn't command loyalty. He earns it through reliability. He doesn't seek power. Power seeks him. The people around you will feel it. Some will be drawn to it, others threatened by it. That's natural. Machiavelli would say that true rulers never explain their strength. They let others interpret it. Your silence will intimidate some. Your restraint will confuse others. Let it. You're no longer here to prove anything. You're here to build something. And so the lesson returns to its origin. Before you conquer the world, conquer yourself. Because the greatest power doesn't lie in ruling nations, commanding armies, or manipulating others. It lies in walking through chaos with your mind unmoved. When you reach that level, the world no longer feels like something to win or lose. It becomes something to shape. That is Machiavelli's ultimate secret. Control yourself completely and you control the game without ever appearing to play.